Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, sitting in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Yemen's map is being redrawn. The plan is to give new regions more power, but will this deepen already existing divides? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is here with us today. What is our Yemeni online community saying?
I would say most of the people tweeting us are saying that the results of this national dialogue, the recommendations of the dialogue, are a good thing, but there are some caveats. Some are tweets saying, I believe it's the solution for the current situation in Yemen only if it's implemented correctly, and it's risky, she says. Of course, we want to hear what all of you at home have to say on this issue, so tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
To discuss this and a lot more, we're joined on set by Atiaf Al-Wazir, co-founder of Support Yemen and a blogger. Atiaf, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. All right, we'll have more with Atiaf and our guest in just a minute. Now, other than Twitter, you can actually participate in today's discussion via Facebook. Just like our page, put your comments on there, and we'll be sure to get them in the discussion.
I'm Dr. Mitch Abrams. I'm a sports psychologist and the founder of Learned Excellence for Athletes, and I'm in the stream.
Yemen's revolution just marked its 3rd anniversary, but the transition from 3 decades of authoritarian rule to democracy, well, it hasn't been smooth. Over the last 10 months, a national dialogue conference brought together opposing political parties to try to find a way forward. And it concluded last week with the president approving the formation of 6 newly mapped regions. These states will have more power, but the plan for federalism was immediately rejected by southern separatists, who argue that it puts them at a disadvantage. The move comes as Yemen battles the growing influence of Houthi fighters, increasing attacks by al-Qaeda elements, a food shortage, and a stagnant economy. As Yemen continues its transition, how should the country deal with these multiple challenges? Joining us is Sama Al-Hamdani, a Yemen analyst and writer of the blog Yemenati. From Sana, Rafat Al Akhali is the co-founder of Resonate Yemen and a youth activist. And from New York, Yemeni activist and Dr. Hamza Al-Shargabi. Great, thanks. Okay, so let's take a look at the map first, right? These are the 6 states that we'll be looking at. And the question I have, Atiaf, to begin with is, how much autonomy or power are we talking about the states being able to have? Is this more of a U.S. model or a model more similar to the Emirates, where they seem to operate almost independently?
I think that's a very important question because that's really at the heart of it. We don't really know yet. Federalism now is just a declaration. We don't have any plan, and it seems like there's no plan, and we don't really know how much autonomy each each state will have, and how much what kind of relationship will be between the capital or between the federal state and the 6 states. There is no buy-in from important stakeholders, like you said, the Southern Movement and the Houthis. And to me, it just seems that the decision was made outside the national dialogue. It was discussed inside the national dialogue, but President Hadi appointed a committee to decide on this, which was taken outside of the dialogue. So that also added to people's worry that this is really something that's imposed rather than something that's being discussed. There's also not a lot of discussion about this, about what exactly this will mean, about the details and how much autonomy will the local municipalities, for example, have. We've tried decentralization in 1990, but it was only ink on paper, no implementation. And this is at the heart of it. Will this be implemented, or will it again just be something that's written and we talk about it, but nothing implemented on the ground?
Hamza, is that fair, that it seems to be unclear what the 6 states, how much autonomy they'll have, that stakeholders, important stakeholders like those in the south and the Houthi rebels, have not bought into it? What say you, sir?
The main issue that is facing federalism, at least on the political level, is the demonizing of the concept. So no one actually in the country speaks of it as it's federal. They say it's united. The other thing is, as any federal system in the world, this is going to take a lot of time, and this was not pretty much calculated, but this has been the topic of debate and demand by several political forces since 1994. And this particular map, the exact map that was published or that was agreed on, was a map that was discussed during the war of 1994 to abort the war, but the war was won prior to the final agreement to it. So this is somewhat an ideal Swedish, if you will, peace agreement, but it's going to take time to prove on the ground, especially with presence of some forces that would like to expand, like the Houthis, and the problem in the south, and without those to be dismantled in a wise way, this is not going to go anywhere. But I think this is an ideal and it's a very good solution, but there are other things that has to happen on the ground for it to be relevant, and
so
this is going to take time.
When you look at the community, is there a sense, because I imagine a lot of people who were involved in the revolution or in our community as well, there's probably like an overlap there of a Venn diagram.
Definitely.
Is there a sense that their goals in the revolution have been achieved through this national dialogue?
I think that's a question that people are asking, and we'll get from our guests. But I want to pick up actually on something that you said, Asiyaf, because you said it won't be implemented. The things haven't been implemented, and that's one of the things a lot of people are picking up on. So Rafat, on Twitter, Abdul Qadir says the outcome of the Yemen National Dialogue, he says it prescribes the cure to our ills, and he means the Yemeni people, but its implementation needs attention. I want you to listen to a video comment from someone who has somewhat of the same view. Have a listen to this.
Yemen's best solution is actually federalism, and so if we can implement this correctly and understand the foundation of the federalism system, this would be great to solve our issues. If for any reason we can't, this will also give us a risk of further division in the country between South-North and the political crisis. So I hope we can manage to actually implement it correctly and move forward in this process.
So Rafat, that's a word we've heard a lot, implementation. What would implementation actually even look like?
Yeah, I think that's the key word here, and that's the reason for a lot of the maybe we could call it the distrust or lack of confidence in the outputs of the national dialogue, is because people don't believe that it's going to be easily implemented, and we don't have a good track record of implementation in Yemen in general, and so that's what a lot of people are concerned about. But then again, it has to start with this step. Like the first step was going to have to be having everyone on the table agreeing on a roadmap to move forward, which was done during the national dialogue, and now we're going to go into the step, as Abiyaf mentioned, of working out the details of what authorities lie, what level of government, how the wealth is going to be shared. So that's the next step that's going to be done by the Constitution Drafting Committee over the next few months. And then comes the implementation. As Hamza mentioned, it's going to be long. We have to carefully manage expectations of people. It's not going to be an overnight thing, or some people think that by the end of the year they're going to have the region and all the authority, and then they can build a different future. So it has to be done carefully. There has to be a lot of communication, especially from the national dialogue committees that have formed now. And then, as you said, implementation is going to be the key.
All right, so Sama, I want to bring you into the conversation here. Sama, when you look back at the revolution, has this national dialogue fulfilled the goals of the revolution?
I think the problem is that the goals to begin with weren't that clear. So you have a national dialogue, and they failed from the very start to prepare for things on the ground. While the dialogue was happening for the past 10 months, there should have been preparation in the field and on the ground for the goals after the dialogue to happen. One of them being federalism. I think the biggest problem now is that we're talking about federalism as a solution, but on the ground we're witnessing a lot of turmoil and a lot of sectarian divides, and so to jump into federalism so quickly just as a political solution can really hurt Yemen.
If I can jump in, just on the question of implementation, it's very important to say that President Hadi, for example, and a lot of members of the National Dialogue have said that the recommendations of the dialogue are binding, yet there is no legislation that says that. Second, the 2014 annual budget for Yemen does not even have one line item for implementing the NDC recommendations, which was actually very worrisome and shows that maybe the government is not very serious about implementing. And this adds to the mistrust that's already there that Rafat already talked about. And third, when you have ongoing violations while we're having dialogue, for example, in the south, the military tanks attacked a funeral in Adala of a member of the Southern Movement that was held outside of a public school courtyard. Now, President Hadi announced that there will be a committee to investigate this. We've had so many committees to investigate things, and once someone the government announces that there's a committee to investigate, you know that it's the end of it. We don't hear anything, what happened, there's no transparency, and nothing after that comes, you know, until now we don't know what happened with that, and that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. A military attacked a funeral. How are we supposed to then address this mistrust between the Southern Movement and the government?
Hamza, can you address that? Can you talk about the mistrust, particularly between the South, the Houthi rebels, and so on?
Okay, let me take this from a different angle. Talking about the implementation and the national dialogue. First thing, the problem of Yemen has never been a written constitution or a written dialogue results. The goal of the national dialogue, at least to me, from looking at it, is political inclusion. And unfortunately, that political inclusion was misused, particularly by the Houthis in the north, and it was not as well coordinated from the state to calm the grievances that are happening in the south. And when it comes to the word implementation, whenever someone mentions implementations, they're actually talking about security and about military. How is this going to be forced when someone says no? And to the clear eye, the security and the army sector in the country is a total wreck. There is nothing left over. What we have right now is heavily armed, organized gangs that are following different warlords, if you will, whether it is security, intelligence, or the army. And things are happening in that sector that no one actually knows about. The Ministry of Defense got attacked. No one knows who did it and why or how. The president, like the ex-president Ali Saleh, was bombed in his home. No one knows how and who did it. And now this thing that happened when they attacked the funeral, actually no one is like, why did that happen? Who did it? Until the point there is nothing.
Right, so Hamza, exactly what you're saying, Hamza, exactly that, and what Atiyaf mentioned earlier, this lack of security is something that a lot of people have questions about. Have a listen to this video comment, Sama. I'd like to direct this to you.
Yemen's GCC broker transition of power in 2011 has spiraled to a number of threats to its stability. Heightened tribal tensions, a growing presence of Islamic extremism, Al-Qaeda especially, and numerous kidnappings are just a number of issues facing the post-transitional Yemen. All the while, poverty is rife, and alarmingly, 42% of its population are between the ages of 0 to 14 years.
So Samahi mentioned a lot of things: heightened tribal tensions, insecurity. Najia on Twitter picks up the back of that, and she says, how do you then apply a federal system in a poor country that's economically, politically, and ideologically divided?
I think that economically, federalism can exhaust Yemen's economy even more and totally collapse it. But I think what we're witnessing in Yemen right now is that we have a government that's not there, that's not present. It's almost like the ministers and people in the government are happy to have the post, but they're not actually carrying out their jobs as we expected them to. Perhaps it's because the government is made up of different political parties and factions. Therefore, they're refusing to kind of work together for the sake of Yemeni people. And it's very sad to see that. And as long as the government continues to be absent, then of course the security is not going to work. There's a lot of things that are, kind of swept under the rug, and AQAP is used as a scapegoat for any kind of suicide or attack because it's convenient at this time. I think Yemen is witnessing something similar to Kant's state of barbarism, which is, it's kind of almost at a state of chaos, but there's a lot of factions that are competing over power.
And one of the things I think exacerbating the situation, or actually that the security situation is exacerbating, is the humanitarian problem going on in Yemen. We have a report from the UN that says an estimated 1 million children require emergency nutrition assistance. It goes on to say that almost half the population will need food aid at some point. We reached out to the World Food Program to ask them about that. This is Bishal Parajuli, who gave us a video comment that I'd like to share now. He's the country director for Yemen for the World Food Program.
Yemen has nearly 10 million people, half of its population food insecure. When people are hungry and starving, there can be no peace. What WP is trying to do is help feed these people, meet their urgent basic need, and contribute to peace and stability. There are displaced population, there is a major level of malnutrition, there are girls, children working, so we want to bring them back to school and help create jobs to the nearly 500,000 migrant population in rural areas and support improve agriculture and infrastructure. So we're investing today and helping for the future as well.
Hamza, is the World Food Program doing enough in Yemen?
As a matter of fact, I am in a huge disagreement of how the aid policy in Yemen works. The policy of the organization in general, and in Yemen as an example, is dehumanizing and it's demeaning to the beneficiaries. If you're asking me, I don't think people should. 10 million. You're going to make 10 million people survive on food rations. This is insane. It's absurd. I just cannot begin to explain how evil this is. If we have all those piles of millions of dollars to be invested in the country, invest in infrastructure. Yemen is number 137 of the quality of roads in the world. So we're ranking quite high in how bad it is. So if there was roads improvement, if they would build hospitals, schools, whatsoever, factories for God's sake. The Marshall Project in Europe costed how many $1 billion? So in comparison to all that aid money, it's just absurd. Investing in the country in infrastructure is going to change, it's going to create jobs, and it's going to infuse money into the local economy instead of buying raw wheat or oil or God knows what from the United States or from Russia or from whomsoever who produces that. The approach in itself is pathological. And it should be fixed. It's from this aid, from this throwing money at poor people into investing on them to produce results, and that can only happen in investing in infrastructure if someone is serious. But this aid business is becoming a monster in Yemen and in all those post-conflict regions. And I mean now in Yemen, the best employer. The only and the best employer you can get is an international NGO, which is it's insane. It's absurd that no one is actually getting employed in the private or the public sector. But
I have someone here on Twitter who agrees with you. Al-Hajji says half the population of Yemen includes malnourished children, internally displaced, vulnerable people are in urgent need of humanitarian aid. But Altaf, I want to shift gears a little bit because we've heard so much about these challenges. We've heard about the security challenges. Our show today is all on those things. But there's a tweet here from Naslihan who takes us back to 3 years ago. She says, we need to ask Yemeni women who were at the forefront of the uprising, taking risks, if they've accomplished anything substantial. Do you think, because you were one of those at the forefront, what do you feel that you've accomplished?
I think that's an important question. It's something that we're all reflecting on now, 3 years later. It's very difficult to answer that, and it's very difficult because things will take years to really change, and it's a step-by-step process. However, if the government is continuing to use the same tools, if the corruption is still rampant, if the same people, the same regime is still intact, now they have different names, it's like musical chairs, they moved around. If we did not have a reform in institutions, for example, the National Unity Government made it that 50% are opposition that worked previously with the former regime, and the former ruling party are in the national government. They employ people based on party loyalty, not based on who has the experience. So a lot of technocrats are out of this equation. And what this meant was that a lot of women also who are independent are not really a part of this process. There have been gains, I have to say, culturally speaking, lots of gains in terms of, we see a lot of women in the national dialogue, and this is definitely a plus. But the problem is, I think, that many of the women in the political elite are very much disconnected from the average women on the streets. For example, if you ask the average women, what is the main challenge? It might come up, and it has come up, that 8 women die every single day in Yemen during child labor. Every single day. This should be a political decision to address this. And this is something that's completely ignored, that was not really discussed in the national dialogue, unfortunately. Not from the women's group. It was discussed in a very broad sense, but not taken seriously. So
wait, how did women go from being the leaders of the revolution, if you will, to not being included in the national dialogue? Where did the link break?
Yeah, I'm jumping.
I mean, there were different ways. This is a long process. So some people applied to join the national dialogue as women, either through the Independent Youth Coalition or through the Women's Bloc.
Here, I've got less than a minute, so let me ask it this way: were women intentionally kept out of the process, or was it some kind of failure of the leadership of the movement?
They were kept out of the process in terms of appointments by the president. You see only 3 women appointed in the new transitional government, and which is completely very low. And they were even low in terms of, they didn't reach the 30% desire that we wanted in the national dialogue. It's still a step forward, but it's not what we wanted.
All right, well look, I got to pause the conversation here, but just for a few minutes. We're going to be taking this discussion to the post show online, but first, here's Malika with a look at some of the other stories that we're following.
Our first leads out of Turkey, where the Twitter following of the country's president is diminishing. According to reports, nearly 80,000 people unfollowed President Gül just hours after he approved a controversial bill set to increase controls over the internet. Well, an avid tweeter, the president announced his ratification of the bill on the site. Netizens responded to the news of the bill with an online campaign against the president, using the hashtag #UnfollowAbdullah But David put it in perspective, tweeting, "It's about 1/50th of his total following." Well, next we go to Norway, where one nonprofit is out to test your generosity. Candid camera style, a jacketless boy is seen shivering at a bus stop as people pass by. The video asks, "Are you a person who acts if you see someone who needs help?" And many did. Take a look. The aim of the campaign is to shed light on the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Syria and to create a call to action. While many commended the campaign, one commenter on Reddit posts, "I'd be interested to see if a Syrian child got the same response." What do you think of the campaign? Tweet us your thoughts using hashtag AJStream. Josh?
So the campaign asked if you're the kind of person that would help. I mean, I would ask the campaign, are you the kind of person that would put a child out in the cold to test your theory?
Just for an ad.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
In Scandinavia, nonetheless.
Exactly,
right?
in Norway, yes.
There's a whole second campaign to be had there, I think.
Right.
All right, well look, thanks Malika. I hope that you're going to join us in this online post show. We're going to talk a lot more about Yemen. And then on the next show of the stream, tomorrow, we're going to talk about former child soldiers and their experiences and what's being done to protect children from the front lines of conflict. So stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. And until then, we'll see you online. All right, welcome back to the Streams Online Post Show. Today we're discussing Yemen and the challenges facing the country. Let's get right back to the discussion. Rafat, I want to ask you, what's the role of foreign intervention there? Like, how is the U.S. interacting, and Saudi Arabia? Is that helping or hurting the situation from your vantage point in Sana'a?
Well, I think there's at least engagement from the majority of international community in Yemen, and so far it's been all on the same front, at least in public. They're all taking the same public stand on the transition in Yemen. But I wanted to...
Well, did we lose Rafat there? Hamza, can you pick up where Rafat was going with that?
I was actually looking forward to hear from him.
Me too. That's why I asked.
Yeah, like at the brink of what he wanted to say, it's like the whole thing collapsed.
The perils of Skype in Sana'a.
Yeah, everyone. I have a very bad analogy of what people think about Yemen. The international community just wants Yemen to not collapse. That's all there is to it. If it is not collapsing, if it's not transforming into a black hole, then it's okay. We're just gonna intervene not to make this thing a hellhole. Other than that, let it burn.
Wow.
And
do you agree with that?
I agree, and actually I think that unfortunately the international community and regional players such as the GCC actually stopped Yemen's revolution, in my opinion. There was a chance for the goals of the revolution to actually succeed, but that was blocked for many reasons, also internally in the opposition. But I think there was a push by the international community to keep the status quo, make cosmetic changes, pretend, have these nice slogans and nice things, but the content was really missing. And it was, again, similar, the regime is still intact, but with different names. The only good thing, I think, is that now, instead of one dominant political elite, you do have it split in two. They're the same people, but they're split. So that's a step one. Now we need revolution number 2, revolution number 3.
When you say the international community was a part of that, name names here. Who are you talking?
I'm talking about the U.S. government, the EU. They were part of writing the GCC Power of Transfer Agreement, and the GCC countries. And, of course, the Yemeni opposition parties and the former ruling party.
Rafat, welcome back. First question, how is Skype in Yemen? Second question, we're talking about the role of foreign intervention. What's it look like from where you're sitting in Sana'a?
As I was saying right now, engagement of international community in the humanitarian situation, I think is welcome and is much needed in Yemen, and it has to go hand in hand what Hamza was talking about with infrastructure investments and long-term fixing of the economy. That's not going to happen today or tomorrow or this year. That's going to be a longer process to happen. But while we do that, there are people starving. There are people with no access to water and food, really. And so those need help.
Don't use that one on me. If they build a hospital now, if they can build a hospital now in Sana'a instead of those like 1960s hospitals. This is very personal to me. If they build a hospital now, they will create jobs that are going to feed those people.
But creating jobs does not guarantee that you're going to have people who are qualified to do these jobs. What you need first is to train the Yemeni employees for it.
This is half-skilled labor. This is like skilled or half-skilled labor, which we have them by the dozen. I mean,
we're 25 million, and we don't have. By the time
any infrastructure projects get into actual implementation in Yemen, and not even in Yemen, in a lot of countries, by the time the government gets to actually implement building the hospital, it takes about a year just to go through the process and the documents and the bids and the tenders and all the bureaucracy and the corruption and all that. So that's never, you will not see a shovel in the ground for another year.
Well, Rafat, you're talking about the government, but you joined with a group of activists to establish a party, and you're hoping to be part of that government. Are you going to be that change, and how are you going to make that different?
Yeah, well, that's the key for the change. I think is changing inside the government, because right now the government is the biggest player in the economy, in everything, and yet we do not have, in my opinion, a well-qualified government staff at all levels that can really, transition the country to where we want to see it go, especially at the regional level now with the federal system and all that. So unless we implement the change inside the government first, it's never gonna change outside the government.
All right, change. Salma, let's bring you in. Where should the change begin? Because I heard you try to jump in the conversation, and I'll be honest, this has turned into like a Yemeni tea shop around here. It feels pretty good. I like it. You were trying to jump in to say, look, you can't have a hospital unless you have skilled people to work in the hospital. You don't have skilled people. So where should the change begin, in your view?
I think they should train a couple Yemenis, put them, into specific jobs that they're going to work out, kind of create an economic reform plan, job stimulus maybe, and then they can talk about federalism and all of that. I think to just discuss politics and to separate all the economic issues that Yemen is going through is a big mistake, because they have to go hand in hand.
So what I wonder is, from yesterday's show we talked about NGOs and the NGO culture and whether they help or not. Does the kind of change that she's talking about need to come from outside organizations like NGOs, or can it come up internally?
I personally think it has to be internal. I mean, NGOs definitely can help. Many NGOs have really good intentions, and many NGOs have helped. Unfortunately, though, it's become a business, and a lot of the aid, especially when it comes to the aid industry, there's a lot of corruption. And when it goes through a government that's also corrupt, that the aid doesn't reach the people it's intending to reach. And this is why I think institutional reform of government institutions need to be reformed, and that's really key here. But unfortunately, because of the unity government that we have, it's only party loyalties that are appointed, not necessarily technocrats. Hopefully in the new government now, we'll see if technocrats are going to be appointed, if they're going to be people that actually know the job. You can't hire somebody in the Ministry of Electricity that has no clue about how to manage or anything about electricity, but just because he happens to be from the same party as the minister, that doesn't really help anybody.
All right, let's do this. I only got a couple of minutes left in the show here, and I want to do kind of around the table and get predictions from everyone. Let's start here in the studio. Give me your looking out 1 year and 5 years. Will Yemen still be on the brink? And you got to keep it pretty short.
I mean, that's a difficult question. I think anybody who thinks they can predict doesn't know Yemen. I'll stop there.
All right, then let's go to Hamza. 1 year and 5 years. What do you see coming down the line?
Nothing. Unfortunately, nothing. It's just gonna. This is what's gonna happen. This is gonna. This tension is gonna be maintained, and if the only surprising factor that might happen is if the Muslim Brotherhood and like the Sana or the Ali Muhsin military tribal compound decided to fight the Houthis, and if that is the only dramatic change. Other than that, it will maintain to be as it is for as long as it can.
Cynicism abound. Rafat, I know that you've been in and out with Skype, so what we're doing here is give me your prediction. You got to keep it pretty short, but Yemen in 1 year and 5 years, how much change are we going to be seeing?
Let me be the optimistic voice here, since I heard everyone was
the guy who
not
can't
brave
keep
enough to be
Skype up. Go ahead, be optimistic.
No, but in 1 year, I don't think much is going to change. It's probably going to continue to be things on paper, moving forward a step at a time. In 5 years, hopefully, we'll have 1 or 2 regions that will be successful, and they'll be a model for the other regions, and everyone is going to try and catch up to them. And then Yemen is going to move forward. What
an optimist. Now, Malika, unless the community has something else to add.
I'll give you this prediction from Mohammed Al-Amrani. He says the chances, he takes us back to the referendum, he says the chances of success are slim, but there is no other alternative.
All right, let's give Salma the last word. Salma?
So I think there are 2 things happening on the ground. There is a process happening in front of our faces and another process that's happening on the ground. So I think there are forces that are going to battle each other, especially in the 2 upcoming months. And I think officially we're going to be seeing the Constitution being written. Ultimately, in 5 years, I think we're going to have to talk about federalism very seriously, and we're going to be in the process of doing that. But I definitely think that this year is going to be very, very tough for Yemenis as they continue to eliminate each other behind the scenes.
Okay, I've considered all of your answers and I've decided I like Rafat's the best. I'm going to go with that. And that's it for today. Tomorrow we're going to speak to former child soldiers about their experiences and what's being done to protect children from the front lines of conflict. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And until tomorrow, we'll see you online.